Good morning, everybody. I hope this video finds all of you healthy and safe. We'll start this morning with the core practice like usual. Find a comfortable spot to sit, relax, and close your eyes. Take deep breaths. So today I am grateful for all of the mail carriers and the UPS workers and the FedEx deliverers who are out there still delivering packages like computer printers because ours broke. So I'm grateful for all of those essential workers that are still delivering things so that we can keep working for you guys. So we're going to finish chapter 5 today. If you remember yesterday, Ramona had quite a scare. She went into the attic at Daisy's house and fell through the ceiling and was dangling her legs over the dining room table. That was a little scary. A fresh worry, paying for the damage, crept into Ramona's mind. Payday, the checks her mother wrote to pay bills, taxes, and all those grown-up things whirled around in her mind. "That was some hole you made," said Jeremy, as she and Mrs. Kidd went into the living room, where Claude was peeking out from under the couch. Muttley, his tail drooping, looked anxious. Ramona suddenly had a new thought. If Daisy hadn't been trying to shut her in a dungeon, none of this would have happened. Maybe it was Daisy's fault. Maybe she should be angry with Daisy. She was confused. She didn't want to be angry with her best friend. Still, she didn't know what to think. Only then did Ramona gather her courage to look toward the dining room, where she saw in the ceiling a dark hole edged with broken lathe and bits of plaster. The dining room table was covered with dust, rubble, and in the midst of the mess, one high-heeled sandal. And the table had been set for, this made Ramona feel really bad, 5 places, one for her. Suddenly, she didn't want to stay for dinner. She wanted to go home. She wanted to be home with her own mother, comforting her with her scratches and for the loss of her best friend. She looked at Daisy, wanting to say, "It was all your fault for pushing me," but she did not say it, not in front of Mrs. Kidd. She would wait until school Monday, and then she would. There's the damage. Table there. Mrs. Kidd put her arm around Ramona. "Would you rather not stay for dinner?" she asked. Ramona nodded. "Then come along," said Mrs. Kidd. "I'll have you home in a jiffy." "Ramona," Daisy was blinking back tears. "It was all my fault. I shouldn't have pushed." Ramona instantly felt both ashamed and much better. So often things that went wrong turned out to be her mistake. She should have known Daisy wasn't the kind of girl to blame people. "No, it wasn't your fault. It was both our faults, I guess." Ramona hesitated. "Promise you won't tell the kids at school?" Daisy crossed her heart, smiled shakily, and said, "Of course, if the beautiful princess had gone peacefully into the dungeon—" Ramona interrupted. "And if the witch had been a nice witch—" Daisy finished for her. "The kind you don't like to read about." Ramona managed to smile back over her shoulder as she followed Mrs. Kidd out the door. On the way home, she ventured a question that had been hovering in the back of her mind. Will it cost a lot of money to fix the ceiling?" she asked Mrs. Kidd. Mrs. Kidd patted Ramona's knee. "Don't worry about it. It was an accident, and I'm sure our insurance will take care of it. And you know something? Even before we moved in, I didn't like the color of the dining room. Now we have no excuse to repaint it." Ramona felt so much better, except for the scratches and stiffness in her legs, that she began to consider the drama of the afternoon. When Mrs. Kidd delivered her to the Quimby's door, she merely said to Mrs. Quimby, "Ramona had a little accident. She'll tell you about it." It was a big accident, thought Ramona, pleased that Mrs. Kidd did not spoil her chance to tell. She really was a nice mother, the nicest she had ever known, next to her own, of course. Mrs. Quimby immediately wanted to know what had happened, but was distracted by Roberta. Ramona stalled for time by going to the bathroom and by darting into her room. When she came out, the family was seated at the dinner table. She then had the attention of her entire family, even Roberta, who was lying in her playpen nearby. Mrs. Quimby said, "Ramona, I thought you were going to have dinner at Daisy's house. And what did her mother mean by a little accident?" Ramona assumed a sorrowful expression. "I was going to stay, but a terrible thing happened." Her family stopped eating. Ramona paused dramatically. Here was her chance to keep Beezus from talking so much about Abby and the party. "Yes, go on," said Mr. Quimby. Ramona took a deep breath. "I broke the ceiling." Another dramatic pause. "I broke it all to smithereens, and it's going to cost $1 bazillion to fix, and it fell all over the dining room and made a terrible mess, so I decided not to stay for dinner." Mr. Quimby became more impatient. "Ramona, get to the point. What on earth are you talking about?" Ramona basked in the attention. "I was a princess trying to escape from a wicked witch who was shutting me in a dungeon, and there I was, all alone in the dark with spiders and bats. Well, maybe not bats." Ramona felt if she exaggerated too much, her family would not believe her. "And I was terrified because the wicked witch was about to break down the door." Maybe she was stretching the truth a tiny bit, but perhaps no one would notice. "And I was terrified because I felt something bump against my leg, something big, something evil, something crawly." Of course, suitcases weren't evil and crawly, but by then Ramona did not want to spoil her story with the truth. "And I was so terrified, all alone in the creepy dark full of cobwebs, that I tried to flee." "Ee!" crowed Roberta. "Ramona," Mrs. Quimby spoke quietly, "I think you're getting carried away." Beezus, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "So you stepped back on the unfinished part of the attic and fell through the ceiling. I know all about those attics because mothers were always telling us to stay off the lath and plaster, and I know someone who really did fall through." Of course. Ramona was annoyed with Beezus for spoiling her story. "Sort of like that," she admitted with a scowl. Mrs. Quimby was shocked. "Why, Ramona, did you fall all the way through? You might have been seriously hurt." "I hung on, but I was wounded." Ramona tried to regain her family's sympathy. "My legs got all scratched and scraped, and it hurt a lot. I was in agony." "There, take that, Beezus," she thought. "And then a handsome prince, Daisy's brother, rescued me." "Jeremy, kid!" Beezus began to laugh. "He's in my math class. Wait till I tell him you called him a handsome prince." "Don't you dare!" Ramona was furious. "Girls," warned Mr. Quimby. "Beezus, there are some things we keep in the family." Beezus stopped laughing. Finally, she asked, "Weren't you wearing pants?" Ramona said in her most dignified way, "Princesses don't wear pants," she paused and added, "unless they're in disguise." The family found this funny. Beezus recovered enough to say, "You must have looked weird, just your bare legs hanging down from the ceiling." "And my underpants," thought Ramona in horror, not having pictured the scene from below until this moment. "Did I fall enough for them to show? What if Jeremy saw them?" She could never face him again. She could see that her family was hiding their smiles at the picture of Ramona's bare legs hanging from the ceiling. This made Ramona sulky. "It really did hurt, because I was wounded. I bled." That ought to impress her family. Her father patted her hand. "I know it was painful, and you could have been badly hurt. But I was brave." Ramona held her head high. "I hung on with all my might and main." She wasn't quite sure what that meant. She had read it in a book someplace, and it sounded right. "Maybe you have a fairy godmother," suggested Mrs. Quimby. "A best friend is better," thought Ramona. "Maybe," agreed Mr. Quimby, "but I think she has been reading fairy tales." "I like fairy tales," said Ramona. "Fairy tales always have happy endings." She paused before she added, "And so does mine, I guess." Her family had paid attention to her, and she still had a best friend. Then she thought to herself, "A happy ending, except for my underpants showing." And that's the end of the chapter. And tomorrow we'll start chapter 6, and it's called The Party. So we'll see what happens. Have a good day.